All right, let's dive in. We're going deep on spies, secrets, and nuclear close calls today. All thanks to that Andrew Bustamante interview you sent from the Jordan Harbinger show.
Ah, yeah, that one.
So you're obviously intrigued by this world, and trust me, this is going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, Bustamante's interview, it's packed with insights. He doesn't just tell stories. He really breaks down how the CIA operates, the realities of international relations, and the whole chilling concept of nuclear
It's
deterrence.
the stuff they don't show you in the movies, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of movies, Bustamante starts off by completely shattering that Hollywood image of a missileer.
Oh, yeah.
You picture it all high-tech, intense, but he describes years spent underground, more boredom than action, and this constant, like, psychological weight.
It's interesting the way he talks about the desensitization drills they'd go through.
Right.
Imagine being trained over and over to launch nukes, to the point where you can't even tell the difference between a drill and a real launch order.
It's pretty intense.
It really makes you think about the fact that those missiles are always ready to go, each one pointed at a target, just waiting for the command.
Makes you wonder about the people in those bunkers, how they deal with that kind of pressure. But let's shift gears from potential global annihilation to something a bit more personal, I guess you could say, espionage.
Mm.
What does it actually mean to be a spy? Bustamante clears up some myths right away.
He makes a clear distinction between CIA officers, the Americans we tend to think of as spies, and agents, who are actually foreign nationals recruited to, well, betray their countries.
No suave American agents working for the CIA then.
Nope. It's all about recruiting assets from other countries.
That changes the whole picture of who's out there gathering intel.
Right.
And even within the CIA, Bustamante talks about this huge range of roles. You've got analysts going through mountains of data, and then you have your field officers working undercover.
Oh, yeah, it's so much more than that lone wolf spy we see in the movies.
And the CIA, they realized they couldn't rely on just one type of person for all that.
Yep.
After 9/11, they started recruiting from all sorts of backgrounds, moving away from that old Ivy League stereotype. Diversity, I guess you could say.
Diversity of thought, for sure. They needed all kinds of skills and perspectives to deal with the complexities of a post-9/11 world.
It makes sense. Different minds for different missions.
Mhm.
But, okay, now get ready for this. Bustamante goes deep on the art of lying. He even gives tips on how to be a better liar.
Which, yeah, I know, sounds a little ethically questionable.
Right.
But the point isn't to encourage dishonesty. It's more about understanding how lying works, the psychology behind it.
I see, I see.
He talks about planning your lie ahead of time, rehearsing it, even making sure your emotions and your logic line up so you're more believable. It's fascinating, even if you never actually plan to use it yourself.
Well, and it could help you spot a liar, which is probably more useful for most people. He
Exactly.
debunks that whole micro-expressions thing, too,
Yeah.
where you can supposedly tell someone's lying based on tiny facial twitches.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Pure Hollywood, he says. Rear lie detection's about establishing someone's baseline behavior and then looking for anything that deviates from that.
Right. It's about noticing inconsistencies, hesitation, whether their words and their body language are matching up.
He even reveals this technique used by spies and, believe it or not, podcast hosts. The 2 questions and a confirmation.
Really?
Yeah. You ask 2 relevant questions, then you offer a validating statement to kind of build trust and rapport.
Interesting.
It's amazing how these techniques work in such different situations.
Yeah. It all comes down to understanding human psychology, I guess, figuring out how to connect with people.
Even if those connections are built on, let's say, creative truth-telling.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of which, Bustamante makes this really insightful distinction between motivation and manipulation. They both involve influencing someone's behavior, but manipulation aims for a goal that's not in their best interest,
Right, right.
while motivation is more about achieving something that benefits both sides.
Yeah, it's a crucial difference.
He uses this acronym, RICE, reward, ideology, coercion, and ego,
Okay.
to illustrate the 4 main motivators used in both espionage and just everyday life.
Interesting.
Like, think about military recruitment.
Yeah.
It's not just about offering a paycheck. It's tapping into patriotism, a sense of duty, even playing on someone's desire for adventure.
It's powerful stuff.
It's amazing how ideology can be such a strong motivator, pushing people to take huge risks, even put their lives on the line.
Absolutely. When you tap into someone's deeply held beliefs and values, you can really influence their behavior in some pretty profound ways.
And get ready for this. Bustamante brings up the idea of the secret life, that part of ourselves we keep hidden, even from those closest to us. And guess what? Exploiting that vulnerability is a powerful tool in espionage.
Uh-oh.
A little creepy, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
He breaks down our lives into three categories: public, private, and secret.
Okay.
Public is what we show the world. Private is for our close circle. And then secret. Those are the thoughts, feelings, experiences we keep locked away, maybe even from ourselves sometimes.
And spies can use that.
Skilled spies can use, like educated guesses and validation, to tap into those secrets, forging a bond that's powerful, sure, but also incredibly manipulative.
Wow. That's a dangerous game, playing on our insecurities and vulnerabilities like that. It makes you wonder, how well do we actually know ourselves, or even those around us?
Like, you think twice about who to trust, right?
Yeah, it's a little unsettling.
But, Bustamante also makes it clear that espionage isn't always about this high-stakes drama and psychological manipulation.
Right, yeah.
He actually criticizes how the media often portrays intelligence work,
Yeah.
saying it's a lot more mundane than, like, the glamorous world of James Bond.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of it involves analyzing data, writing reports, attending endless meetings.
So much paperwork. It's not all car chases and shootouts like you see in the movies.
He even tells this funny story about how the parking situation at CIA headquarters is just as bad as any other government bureaucracy.
Oh, I bet.
It's kind of a funny reminder that even the CIA, with all its secrets and intrigue, is still dealing with the same everyday problems as everyone else.
Totally.
But even though there's a lot of that, let's say, less exciting stuff involved, CIA training does have its moments.
No, yeah.
Bustamante says they use these simulations that are surprisingly similar to what we see in spy movies,
Like what?
like fake towns, evading capture, building relationships with potential assets, extracting information, all under pressure.
Wow.
What's interesting is that these training scenarios now often involve working with other agencies,
Yeah.
like the FBI.
Makes sense.
It reflects that post-9/11 world where intelligence sharing and collaboration are super important.
Got to be on the same page, right?
Exactly. All hands on deck. And speaking of tackling threats, Bustamante actually shares some interesting insights into how the CIA assesses potential recruits. You'd think they're just looking for brilliant minds and fearless adventurers, but it's not that simple.
There's more to it, huh?
He says they look for a balance of analytical skills, risk tolerance, and get this anxiety.
Anxiety, really?
He even argues that anxiety can be a superpower in intelligence work.
That's fascinating. How so?
Well, think about it. Anxious individuals tend to be more detail-oriented, thorough, cautious, all valuable traits in espionage.
I guess so. You don't want someone rushing into a dangerous situation without thinking things through.
It's interesting how he flips what's often seen as a negative trait into a potential asset.
It is. Makes you wonder what other weaknesses might actually be strengths in disguise.
Right.
Maybe we all have hidden superpowers.
Definitely something to think about.
And while we're challenging assumptions, Bustamante also talks about the importance of having a gift of fear, that gut feeling that warns you of danger. Oh yeah, intuition is important.
But he emphasizes the need to control that fear so it doesn't paralyze you or lead to bad decisions.
You have to harness it, right?
He described how CIA training helps officers reprogram their responses to fire, slowing down that emotional reaction and speeding up the rational one.
Interesting.
It's about finding that balance where fear serves as a warning signal without overwhelming your ability to think clearly.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a valuable skill not just for spies, but for anyone in a high-pressure situation.
Absolutely. Whether you're facing a physical threat or a tough business negotiation, managing that fear is crucial.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of pressure, let's talk about the global intelligence landscape. Bustamante doesn't shy away from comparing the CIA to other agencies around the world, and he highlights some stark differences in ethics and risk tolerance.
He contrasts the CIA's more motivational approach with the, let's say, more ruthless tactics of agencies like Russia's SVR and Israel's Mossad.
Yeah, it's a different world.
It's a reminder that espionage operates in shades of gray, and what's acceptable in one context might be totally off limits in another.
For sure.
He even mentions that rival agencies, like Pakistan's ISI and India's RAW, they actually engage in covert operations and assassinations against each other using tactics the U.S. would never condone.
Wow.
It really highlights those intense rivalries and geopolitical complexities, especially in regions with a history of conflict.
It's a whole other level.
And one of Bustamante's biggest concerns is the rising influence of China. He argues that while the U.S. was preoccupied with the war on terror, China strategically built up its economic and military power.
They were playing the long game, huh?
Exactly. And it's not just about economic and military power. Bustamante suggests that China's intelligence apparatus might be even more sophisticated than we realize.
Hmm.
They're using this combination of modern technology and traditional espionage tactics to gather information and influence events all over the world.
That's concerning.
It's definitely a wake-up call. We can't underestimate China's ambitions or capabilities. But there's a twist to this.
Oh.
Bustamante also points out that Xi Jinping's recent actions, particularly his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and his more aggressive foreign policy, could actually be China's undoing.
Interesting. So even the most powerful regimes are vulnerable to their own missteps.
It seems like it's a classic case of overreach, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I see that.
Xi Jinping's attempts to consolidate power and assert China's dominance have kind of backfired in some ways.
And that's created resistance.
Yeah, and it could undermine his long-term goals.
It's a fascinating paradox. They've been so carefully orchestrated for decades, but now their own actions could jeopardize everything.
It's a good reminder that even in the world of espionage and global power plays, there's always an element of unpredictability.
Things really go exactly according to plan.
And understanding cultural nuances is super important too.
Oh, for sure.
Bustamante notes that the CIA, despite its reputation for secrecy, is actually pretty transparent compared to agencies like China's MSS.
Really?
Yeah, they prioritize saving face and suppressing anything that could be perceived as negative, which makes it really hard to predict what they'll do next.
I can imagine.
It's a reminder that we need a more nuanced understanding of our adversaries if we want to compete effectively on the global stage.
We can't just rely on old assumptions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have to adapt and evolve to meet these new challenges.
We need to be more agile, creative, and willing to challenge our own biases.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one last point that Bustamante makes, and it's a big one. He talks about this concept of Snowdenization, this idea that Edward Snowden's leaks about NSA surveillance programs have had a chilling effect on intelligence gathering.
Right. It was a huge controversy.
He argues that while Snowden's intentions might have been noble, his actions made it a lot harder for intelligence agencies to collect the information they need to protect national security.
It's a tough one.
It's a really complex issue, raising questions about the balance between privacy and security in the digital age.
Definitely. It's a debate that's still going on today.
And it's one that we, as citizens, need to be part of. How much privacy are we willing to give up in the name of security? And who gets to decide where that line is?
Tough questions. Questions without easy answers.
But they're questions we have to face as we navigate an increasingly interconnected world.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? This whole world of secrets and spies.
It really is. And it makes you think, you know?
But that's what's so compelling about Bustamante's perspective. He peels back the layers on a world we rarely get to see, forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, deception, and how we react in the face of fear. So what really hit home for you after going through all of this?
You know, for me, it was Bustamante's description of those missileers, the ones stuck underground for years, knowing they hold the world's fate in their hands.
Yeah.
That level of responsibility, I mean, most of us can't even imagine it.
It's heavy stuff. And his insights into the psychology of lying and manipulation, well, it changes how you see everyone a little, doesn't it?
It does make you wonder about people's motives a bit more, even in just everyday interactions. But it also makes you think about self-awareness.
Right.
The more we understand our own weaknesses, the better we can resist manipulation, whether it's from a spy or just someone trying to sell us something we don't need.
It's true. Like Bustamante said, knowledge is power. Understanding those tactics can really help us navigate the world, you know. And speaking of knowledge, his analysis of China's rise in their intelligence operations was pretty eye-opening.
It was a bit of a wake-up call, I think, especially for those of us in the U.S.
Definitely.
We've been in a position of power for so long, it's easy to get complacent. But things are changing, and China's playing the long game. Strategically.
It's not just about military strength or economic power anymore. It's about information influence shaping the global narrative.
Exactly. And that's what makes Bustamante's perspective on espionage so valuable, I think. It's like he's giving us this behind-the-scenes look at the forces that are really shaping our world.
Even if we don't always see them directly.
Right.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for understanding the news. You start noticing those hidden agendas, the power plays, the manipulation happening just below the surface.
It can be empowering, though.
Oh, for sure.
It makes us more critical thinkers, helps us question the information we're bombarded with, and ultimately make more informed choices about the world we want to be a part of.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been a wild ride, full of twists and turns, but in the end, it's left me feeling more informed, more aware, maybe even a little more cautious.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I do too. So to our listener, as you go about your day, keep these insights in mind. Notice those subtle cues. Question the narratives you're given. And never forget, even in a world of shadows, knowledge really is power.